Hello YouTube. I want to talk about the discoveries and information that Ivan Efremov, who passed away in 1972, left behind. He was a Soviet writer and paleontologist, a great man of science. In addition to introducing the new paleontological field, the study of fossilization patterns, Efremov has written a series of novels and short stories, including science fiction, historic fiction, adventure, and drama. Efremov possessed tremendous knowledge of history and profound understanding of psychology. I will not describe here what I already shared with my audiences in great detail in other videos that you can find in my channel playlist titled Ivan Efremov. Suffice it to say, the Soviet secret police, the KGB, had determined that Efremov was an extraterrestrial, an alien. They investigated him and upon his death entered his apartment and confiscated his personal things. Their actions were despicable, but KGB people were not stupid. My fascination with this mysterious genius who lived in the USSR began when I was in my early teenage years and read his novels. Later, in my own research, I followed leads Efremov left in his works and found tremendous information. I have been sharing it with the world in my books, videos, and lectures in the United States, Brazil, Hong Kong, and I remind the Russians to read and study legacy left to them by this powerful genius, whoever he was. Whether one of the mysterious members of the Nine Unknown Society, whether a time traveler, which is my hypothesis, or an alien being from another planet. So today I want to talk about Africa, a fascinating continent, and definitely Efremov knew quite a lot about it, and he shared information in various ways. The novel The Land of Foam appeared in 1949. It is a story of the art and culture of ancient Greece and ancient Egypt, of the people inhabiting the world of those days. The varying landscape of Africa is shown in all its awe-inspiring grandeur. It starts in ancient Greece during the Aegean period. Well, no precise dates are provided by Efremov, but one can assume date to be around 1000 or 900 BC. A young Greek sculptor named Pandion sets off on a journey to Crete, Minoan kingdom, but the story finally lands him in Egypt, where he is enslaved by the Egyptians, escapes, and on his way back has many thrilling adventures. He manages to win his freedom, and after a long and perilous journey comes back home. With his friends, the African Kidogo, the Etruscan Cavius, and some Libyan people who also escaped with them, he crosses the African continent, and on reaching the sea, Pandion carves a wonderful cameo which portrays his friends and some details of their adventures, a symbol of friendship and loyalty. Ivan Efremov managed to create a wonderful atmosphere of the ancient world like he knew it in great detail. The book is full of descriptions of everyday life, customs, rituals, and customs of ancient countries and tribes. Reliable descriptions of the flora and fauna of Africa are very widely presented, almost in the format of a reference book. It's like he was there with the escaped slaves. But with all this, the intrigue of adventure constantly twists with the new force throughout the book and does not let you get bored in the process of reading, which turns out to be both interesting and informative. I mean it. This book is available in English. You can find it. I wish other books, more of his books, were available in English. Here's what is of interest to me, and I'll explain why. During their journey, escaped slaves came to the land of the elephant people, those who tamed and drove African elephants. While staying in the big village where they lived, the friends had a few adventures. They also heard narrative of one of the chiefs. The land was ruled by a council of elders. The chiefs questioned the travelers closely, examined their weapons, and the brand of Pharaoh on their backs. And they made Cavius and Pandion tell them about their countries to the north of the distant sea. During the conversation, escaped friends learned about some strange animals, or what we call today cryptozoology, and about ruins of some very ancient civilizations. So Pandion was astonished at the extent of knowledge of these people. They had not only heard of the land of Noob, where the travelers had come from, but they also knew many other places in Africa in the north, south, east, and west. The chief told them that farther to the east and south of the place where the former slaves lived, as the guests of this hospitable people, beyond the swamps and mountains, there were big freshwater seas. The seas were so big that they could be crossed only on special boats, and that the crossing took several days. The freshwater seas formed a long chain, one after the other, running in a southerly direction, and were surrounded by mountains that belched smoke, flames, and rivers of fire. Now, the freshwater seas and the Great Lakes of East Africa, this is what Efremov clarified. They were the Great Lakes of East Africa. Beyond these seas, however, there was dry land, high plateau with numerous wild animals, while the real edge of the earth, the shore of the endless sea, lay still farther to the east, beyond a fringe of swamps. On the plateau stood two gigantic, blindingly white mountains, not very far from each other, the beauty of which cannot be conceived by a man who has not seen them for himself. Mountains Kenya and Kilimanjaro, two of the highest peaks on the African continent, clarified Efremov. These mountains, said the chief, were surrounded by dense jungles, inhabited by savage people and mysterious animals of an ancient type that were very rare and quite impossible to describe. The elephant people had seen canyons filled with the bones of huge animals, mixed with the bones of human beings and fragments of their stone weapons. In the thickets that surround the northernmost white mountain, there were wild boars as big as a rhinoceros, and once they had seen an animal there as big as an elephant and much heavier, with two horns placed side by side at the end of its jaw. People lived in floating villages, and Efremov clarified that villages built on huge rafts are still to be seen on the great East African lakes. On the freshwater seas that they could not be reached by their enemies. These were savage people who gave no quarter to anybody. Pandion asked the chief how far to the south the land of Africa ran, and whether it was true that there the sun was again lower. And the old man perked up at this question. It turned out that he had commanded a big expedition to the south when he had been less than 40 years old. They went on 20 selected elephants for gold and for precious grass of the southern plains that gives strength to the aged and health to the sick. Beyond the great river, the Zambezi, with the Victoria Falls, again clarified Efremov, that flows from east to west, where there are giant waterfalls and a permanent rainbow plays in the high columns of spray, there are endless blue grass plains. Along the fringes of these grassy plains, along the seacoast, in the west and in the east, there are mighty trees whose leaves seem to be made from polished metal and glitter in the sun like a million mirrors. The grass and leaves in the south, said the old man, are not green but gray, pale blue and dove-colored, which makes the country look strange and cold. It is true, too, that the further you go to the south, the colder climate becomes. The period of the rains, he added, which coincides with our dry season, is unbearably cold for northern people. The old man told Pandion about an extraordinary silver tree that is found in the mountain gorges far to the south. The tree grows to a height of 30 cubits. has thin bark with transverse wrinkles. Many branches covered with leaves shine like silver and are as soft as down. The tree, he said, is possessed of magic beauty that charms all who see it. Barren stony mountains, he continued, rose up like giant purple towers with vertical walls, at the foot of which crouched twisted trees covered with large bunches of bright red flowers. On the barren parts of the plain and the stony slopes of the hills, ugly twisted bushes and low trees grew. Near the rivers and on the fringe of the forest, there were ruins of ancient buildings made of huge dressed stones, apparently the work of a powerful and highly skilled people. Today, said the old chief, there is nobody living in the vicinity of these ruins, except the dangerous wild dogs that howl there in the moonlight. Nomad herdsmen and poor hunters wander the plains. Still farther to the south, there are people with light gray skin who have huge herds of cattle, but the expedition of the elephant people did not go so far. And Efremov clarified that the tribes of the Hottentot type were much more widespread in the times of antiquity than at present. There is some reason to believe that they related to the ancient Egyptians. Now, later in the book, the three friends joined an expedition to obtain young elephants for training, a very dangerous hunt. They got separated from the elephant people detachment and had a very unusual encounter. The three friends, their spears grasped firmly in their hands, set out southwards along the chain of rocky hills. They hastened away from the gloomy battlefield, where the carrion eaters were feasting on dead elephants. The howls died away behind them, and the plain around them seemed dead, and only the swift steps of the three men broke the silence of the night. Kidogo carefully avoided dense groves of trees and thickets of bushes that formed mysterious black hills towering here and there above the grass. The African chose his path through the open spaces that gleamed like white lakes in a labyrinth of black islands of vegetation. The chain of rocky hills turned to the west, and a narrow strip of forest kept the friends close to the rocks. Kidogo turned to the right and led the way across a long, stony, open space that sloped down in a southerly direction. Suddenly the African stopped, turned abruptly around, and stood listening. Pandion and Kavius strained their ears, but not a sound could they hear in any direction. As before, absolute silence reigned supreme. The African went hesitantly forward, increasing his pace, and did not answer the whispered questions of the Etruscan and the Greek. They had advanced a further 1,000 cubits when Kidogo again stopped. His eyes showed a troubled gleam in the bright moonlight. "Something is following us," he whispered, and lay down with his ears to the ground. Pandion followed his friend's example, but Cavius remained standing, straining his eyes to see through the silver curtain of the moonlight. Pandion lay with his ear pressed to the hot, stony earth, and at first could hear nothing but his own breathing. The silent, menacing uncertainty alarmed him. Pandion held up his head, and the sound stopped immediately. Kidogo continued listening for some time, pressing first one, then the other ear to the ground. Then he leaped to his feet like a spring was released. "Some big animal is following us. It's a bad thing that I don't know what animal. Its claws are outside, like those of a dog or hyena. So that isn't a lion or a leopard." "A buffalo or rhinoceros," suggested Cavius. Kidogo shook his head energetically. "No, it's a beast of prey," he snapped with confidence. "We must find cover. No trees near us," he whispered, looking around in alarm. The country ahead of them was an almost level, rocky stretch of open ground with occasional tufts of grass and small bushes. "Forward as fast as we can," Kidogo hurried them on, and the friends ran along carefully, trying to avoid the long thorns on the bushes and the cracks in the dried earth. Suddenly a weak, scarcely audible sound was transmitted through the earth From a distance, the regularly repeated sounds grew more frequent. Click, click, click. Pandion looked over his shoulder and saw a tall, swaying silhouette, a gray phantom pursuing them. Kidogo kept turning his head this way and that way, trying to pick out a tree somewhere ahead of them and to judge the speed of the unknown animal. He realized that the trees were too far away and that the friends would not be able to reach them in time. "The animal is gaining on us," said the African, stopping. "If we keep our backs to it, we shall die a sorry death," he added excitedly. "We must fight it," said the saturnine Cavius. The three friends stood side by side, facing the menacing gray phantom that was bearing down on them in silence. During the whole period of pursuit, the animal had not emitted a single sound, and it was this strange fact, so unusual in the wild beasts of the plains, that disturbed the friends. The diffused gray silhouette grew darker, its outlines became clearer. When the animal had reduced the distance between them to no more than 300 cubits, it slowed down and approached at a steady walk, confident that its chosen victims would not escape. The friends had never seen any such animal. Its massive forelegs were longer than its hinds. The forepart of the body rose high above the spine. The back sloped away towards the croup. The heavy head with massive jaws and a steep prominent forehead sat upright on the thick neck. The animal's short, light fur was speckled with darker patches. Long black hair stuck up on the back of its head and neck. It bore a distant resemblance to a spotted hyena, but of a monstrous size, such as no one had ever seen before. Its head was a good 5 cubits from the ground. The wide chest, shoulders, and withers were frightening in their massiveness. The muscles stood out like hillocks, and the huge claws clattered maliciously on the ground, putting fear in those who heard them. The beast moved with a strange irregular gait, swinging its slow rump and nodding its heavy head, so that the lower jaw almost touched the throat. "What is it?" asked the Pandion in a whisper, licking his dry lips. "I don't know," answered the perplexed Kidogo. "I've never heard of such an animal." The animal suddenly turned, its huge eyes, directed straight at the waiting man, lit up with flickering flames. The animal sidled around the man to the right, then stopped again with its eyes fixed on them. Its rounded ears jutted out obliquely from its head. "The brute is intelligent. It has moved round so that the moonlight is against us," whispered Kidogo, his breath coming in short grasps. A nervous shiver ran through Pandion's body, such as he always felt before a dangerous fight. The animal drew a deep breath and advanced slowly on the man. Its movements in its malevolent silence, in the persistent stare of the big eyes under the protruding forehead, there was something that distinguished it from all other animals the friends had ever seen. The three men realized instinctively that the animal was a relic of an older world with other laws of life. Shoulder to shoulder, their spears held ready, the three men advanced to meet the nocturnal monster. For an instant it stood still, perplexed, then uttering a short, hoarse sound, hurled itself at them. The huge jaw opened, the thick teeth flashed in the moonlight as 3 spears plunged into the broad chest and neck of the monster. The man could not withstand the pressure of the animal's weight, and furthermore, it possessed enormous strength. The spears struck against bone and were turned aside and pulled out of their hands. The 3 of them were thrown back. Kidogo and Pandion managed to scramble to their feet, but Cavius found himself lying under the beast. The two friends rushed to his rescue. The monster sat back on its hind legs and suddenly swung on its front paws. Blunt claws struck Pandion in the hip with such force that he fell and almost lost conscience. The animal planted its enormous paw on Pandion's leg, causing him terrifying pain. The joints cracked and the animal's claws tore skin and flesh. Pandion, keeping his spear in his hand, lifted himself from the ground with both hands in an effort to rise, and as he did so, heard Kidogo's spear shaft break. Rising to his knees, he saw that the African was held down by the animal, whose open jaw was drawing near him. Kidogo, his eyes popping out of his head, was pressing both hands under the lower jaw of the monster in an effort to turn his head away. Pandion's trusted friend was perishing before his eyes. The young Greek was beside himself and, feeling no pain, jumped up and thrust his spear into the animal's neck. The animal snapped its teeth loudly and turned on Pandion, knocking him off his feet with the movement. The young Greek did not let go of the spear, and holding the spear shaft on the ground, for a short time held the animal fast, while Kidogo managed to get out his knife. Neither Pandion nor the African noticed Cavius rise up on the other side of the animal. Baring his teeth in a grin, the Etruscan coolly aimed at the animal's flank with his spear and thrust it in behind the shoulder blade with both hands. The long blade went in a cubit deep. A roar escaped from the opening mouth of the monster. It shuddered convulsively and turned left towards the Etruscan. The latter, hunching his shoulders and pulling his head down between them, staggered but did not fall. Kidogo, with a piercing yell, drove his knife into the animal's throat, and at that same moment the Etruscan spear reached the animal's heart. The great beast collapsed convulsively, an unbearable stench spread around it. Pandion withdrew his spear and thrust it again into the back of the animal's neck, but this last blow was unnecessary. The animal stretched its neck, stabbed its jaw against Cavius, and stretched out his hind legs that were still quivering. The claws scratched the earth, the muscles contracted under the skin, but the stiff hairs on the back of the neck had fallen flat. Great was the joy of the three friends at their deliverance from this terrible monster that lay motionless before them in the moonlight. The African was examining his nocturnal pursuer and was explaining to Cavius that he had seen drawings of such animals in Takem, ancient Egypt, among pictures of other animals in a tomb in the city of the white walls. Cavius stuck out his lower lip incredulously. Kidogo swore that he tried to convince his friend that the inhabitants of Takem had no doubt met with such animals in the distant past. The sun rose higher. Thirst tormented the three friends, and they were racked with fever from their wounds. Kidogo and Cavius had decided to go in search of the water when they suddenly heard voices. 3 elephants with warriors on their backs were moving across the plain below the stony slope on which the friends had met the terror of the night. The elephant people, hearing Kidogo's shouts, turned their elephants towards them and set them at a faster pace. The elephants were approaching the 3 strangers when they suddenly shied and began trumpeting uneasily, raising their trunks and spreading their ears. The warriors jumped down from their platforms and ran towards the dead monster with cries of "Gishu, Gishu." The elephant people told the 3 friends about the Gishu, a very rare and dangerous animal. Nobody knew where it lay hidden during the day, but during the night it wandered about in silence, attacking young elephants, rhinoceros, and the young of other big animals. The Gishu was exceptionally strong and stubborn in battle. Its terrible teeth could bite off the leg of an elephant at one snap, and its powerful forepaws crushed its victims, breaking their bones. This is what I wanted to share with you. Many years ago, I traveled to southern Africa largely because of Efremov's writings, and found very interesting facts of my own. I talked to some big game hunters who told me about strange abandoned ancient cities, and about unusual animals that they sometimes encountered after living decades in Africa. It is obvious to me that Ivan Efremov knew quite a lot about Africa, and he had a special interest in the ocean off the coast of Southwest Africa, and Alexander the Great's crown with mysterious crystals in it, found in a shipwreck of an ancient Greek vessel, according to Efremov. Yoga, telepathy, hypnosis, ancient mysteries, it's all interconnected, and the Russian, if that's who he was, scientist, he knew it. There's so much more in Efremov's legacy that should be researched, but again, much of the information is locked away in the Russian state secret archives, inherited from the Soviet times. Someone is still afraid to make the knowledge public, so we go on reading the books that a very unusual human being, if that is what he was, left behind. Thank you for your attention to my research. If you can support me, please do. There are links in the description to this video, and stay tuned for more. Thank you.